Hello, beautiful! Welcome back to the Story Girl podcast, where we dream together and dive into the stories we adore. Grab a drink and some blankets, because it's time to get cozy and chat about the timeless art of storytelling. Hey, beautiful, and welcome to the very first episode of the Story Girl podcast. I am so excited. I have been brainstorming and dreaming about this podcast for almost a year now, and it's finally here. Oh my goodness. This podcast is going to be all about dreaming together and fangirling over the stories that inspire us, whether they're in books, movies, TV shows, maybe even video games. Depends on what you're interested in, but we're going to be studying them. We will talk about a variety of different story elements such as plot, character, theme, you name it. We're going to be discussing it because stories have them. They have lots of elements, and I want to dissect them all. So, if you love book-to-screen adaptations, that's also something we're going to be talking about, and we're going to talk about how to consume as a storyteller. We're going to talk about so many good story-related things. So, why did I start this podcast? Well, for one, I'm a story girl, the Story Girl podcast. Just like Lucy Maud Montgomery's character, Sarah Stanley, I love to tell a good story, and I love to consume a good story, but I also love to study them and share what I've learned. You see, before I started this podcast, I did not feel that I was the right person to be teaching people about stories. But even though I don't have a degree and I don't have years of experience, I'm realizing that I have spent years studying stories. I, like everyone else, have been hearing stories from the time I was in the womb. I may not have a degree, I may not have some fancy PhD in English literature or creative writing, but I know how stories work, and I love them. And if nothing else, at least we can learn together, because it is so important to share what we learn and to learn from each other. It's so important. So in each episode, we will explore different elements of storytelling and dissect some of our favorite narratives. We'll ask the age-old question, what makes a story worth telling? I'll have episodes from everything to the magic of 90s rom-coms to the power of theme, and so much more. I may even have a little controversial debate about which Pride and Prejudice is the best. So, stay tuned for that because that'll be an interesting episode. I'll also be sharing my own thoughts on my favorite stories and possibly some of your own recommendations. So don't be shy. Make sure you share your recommendations with me because I need them. I need lots of ideas. So I also wanted to talk about the power of stories and how they shape us. Stories teach us what a textbook can't. Stories have been used to relay a message from the very beginning of time. I mean, even Jesus used stories, which he called parables, to teach people lessons about life and how to be godly. And you know what? A good story can not only entertain us, but impact our minds, the way we think, the way we feel, the way we live. And the best stories I've read, guess what, have been the ones that have impacted me on the deeper level. So, stories have power. Do not underestimate it. Ultimately, the most important goal of this podcast is that we learn together. I want us to share our knowledge with one another so we can become better storytellers, and so we can have a community of people who love stories, because stories are so good at bringing people together. So let's harness that. If you're excited to explore stories with me, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. It's really gonna help. You can also follow me on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube to keep up with all of the Story Girl related content. And if you're listening on YouTube, my handles will be in my bio, and if you're on Spotify, my handles will be in the podcast description. So make sure you go click on those and let's grow this community, okay? In the next episode, we're diving into the irresistible charm of 90s and 2000s rom-coms, why they captured our hearts, and why they're still so much better than what we have today. So stay tuned, make sure you're subscribed. We are going to have a blast. Thank you so much for listening to the very first episode of the Story Girl podcast. I can't wait to fangirl over stories with you every week. Now, go dream, my friend. Kisses. Mwah.